Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are across the known world, and welcome back to another fun interview with the Crown Between Two Roses. I'm Countess Beatrice, and today we have a ring-in host of Sir Eva of Lochac, and thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Before we start all of our interviews, we do an acknowledgement of country and acknowledging the traditional owners. So good nobles, we come here together in the spirit of fellowship, deepening of our skills, sharing of our knowledge, and a shared interest in archaeology, shared interest in the truth to find truth through experimental archaeology and historical inquiry. It is in this context that I, Countess Beatrice Maria Malatesta, on behalf of my kingdom, acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we gather. We recognise their continuing connection to land and culture, and we pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and elders from other communities who may be here today. So today we are very lucky to have with us Duke Frederick of Holland, who we know as Fleeg, and we know him as a founding member of the SCA. So welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
It's my pleasure. So I gather that, I'm supposed to be answering questions and stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
So give me a question.
I'm sorry, I'm just in awe of you're so renowned. And you're, of course, affectionately known as Fleeg too, and renowned through most of the known world. So I guess I would like to know, and I'm sure you get asked all the time, how did you start in the SCA? I know I hear that you were there at the very first party. I would love to know about that.
Yes, I was. And the way I got involved in the SCA was that I was part of science fiction fandom. There was a big overlap in the very beginning between science fiction fandom and the SCA. In fact, approximately 100%. And I lived down in Los Angeles at the time. And there was a thing called an APA, an Amateur Press Association, in which people essentially wrote weekly blogs, but they printed them out on paper and brought them to the meeting to be collated, and then you would take home a copy of everybody else's pages, and then you made comments and things like that. It was very primitive, but also very interactive, very immersive. And we got a page in APA-L, Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society. It said, hey, we're going to hold a grand tournament for the Dismay. And it is open to anyone from any culture bearing swords. I'm sure that you've seen copies of that flyer on the web, because I know they're there. And it was a Sunday, and as it happened, a bunch of Las Vegas people were coming up to the Bay Area to visit with friends and go to a production of Gilbert and Sullivan, which I think was Pinafore that time, put on by a San Francisco play company. And this was something that happened about twice a year. But they were coming up on April 30th, May 1st. And I hitched a ride, being a college student at the time, and said, basically, I'll find my own way back. And made myself a tunic and made myself a banner, and went to the address that it was advertised, and it was noon. And I sort of looked around and I didn't see anybody. And so I walked around the block with my little pack, which had my banner and tunic in it. Came back about 20 minutes later, and there were all sorts of people in the backyard. And so I sort of sneaked in, being shy, and introduced myself, and they said, "Great, welcome. We didn't expect anybody from down south." And I had fun, and along about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I had to go and make my way down to the bus station and take a bus back to Pasadena so that I could make my Monday morning classes. And that was the first tournament, short version. There were lots of things that went on, including, well, SCA time established. First, actual experimental archaeology, when Duke Siegfried von Höflichkeit, as he is now known, had made, even before the SCA existed, had made a leather and wood shield, painted leather over wood. And the question was, would it stand up to a crossbow? It turned out that one of the other people there from Berkeley had a crossbow at home in his basement. So he trotted home, brought out the crossbow, a really hefty 50-pound crossbow. We didn't know anything. And it had a bolt with an arrow point on it, a hunter's point. Again, we didn't know anything. We did know enough to stand behind the crossbow while it was being fired. We were totally stupid. We just ignorant. And so the shield was put up against the wall of the house, and Beverly took his crossbow and cocked it, loaded the bolt, and fired. And there was a crack, and the bolt disappeared. And it was okay, where'd it go? And we looked under the house, and we looked at all the bushes. Finally, we noticed that there were these little wood fragments right in front of the shield. Well, it was a wooden crossbow bolt. It had hit the shield and shattered.
Oh.
We later found the point, that hunting point, curled into a spiral. There was a dent on the shield.
That is not the answer to that question I thought we would find. That's amazing.
Well, it wasn't a 150-pound crossbow, and it wasn't a steel bolt. The steel bolt would have gone right through the shield and through the paneling of the house. So it's just as well it wasn't. But that was the first experiment in experimental archaeology. And
what was the combat like on the day? Because I know that there was a tournament, but
there was a tournament, and you can see videos of it. They're up on the web. We had fencing masks. We were doing broadsword fighting with rapiers, wooden sticks, 1x2 lath. I broke one of the last of the 1x2 lath swords in my first battle. And we knew that it was dangerous, so we were wearing 3 weapons masks, not standard fencing masks, because they're built heavier. And there was a demo of a Rotarius versus a gladiator. The gladiator had a wooden sword that was quite thick and heavy, and the Rotarius had a trident and a net. Rotarius got eaten for lunch. And if we look at the movies, or the videos rather, which were actually movies because they were taken with an 8mm movie camera on film.
Oh, wow.
We didn't have video cameras. It's 1966. You know, in the before times.
It's amazing that someone had that available, to be honest. I'm amazed there's footage of it.
A lot of people who were not poor and not college students, which those two, of course, intersect, had at that time a Super 8 cameras. They were all the thing for doing home movies in suburbia, basically. And so it's very tentative. There's little reaching out like this, poking and stuff like that. And you know, Victor was proclaimed. He proclaimed his lady Queen of Love and Beauty, and that is the foundation of pretty much our entire royalty system. And a young fellow who had proved himself quite worthy was knighted. And a lot of things were retconned from about the fourth tourney back just to make history all nice and smooth and easy. But it was a lot of fun. People gathered around the fire afterwards. I wasn't there for that. I was on a bus from Oakland to Pasadena, which was not a comfy trip, but I had classes in the Monday morning.
That was very sensible.
Well, one of them was German and I was failing it. So I had to show up at least.
Absolutely.
I finally managed to pass, which was good. It was a required course. You had to pass it because I was a chemistry major. Anyway, so there's a lot more extra stuff.
Sorry, B?
How old were you when, I'm just asking, how old were you when you went to the first event?
19 and 3/4. Actually,
wow.
19 and 5/12
Wow.
and 11/12 because my birthday is in May. And so I can always figure out what SCA year it is because as soon as it's after May, I just add 20 to the current SCA year. Or subtract 20 from my age. It's one way or the other.
What amazes me about that story is it's just so, it's crazy to think how something that seems so, you know, simple and just a fun idea put together by, you know, an extended group of friends has amassed into this huge foundation when you think about it. I mean, it's amazing for me to hear the story because, you know, from the sound of it, we could have ended up as a science fiction group, or, you know, somebody could have gotten shot with a crossbow bolt, but it didn't. It turned into this amazing thing that thousands of people sort of found their life around in a lot of ways. It's such a lifestyle for so many for so long. So it's amazing.
Yes, well, as a matter of fact, the Mythopoeic Society, which also got started around that time, at J.R.R. Tolkien Society, for a long time was essentially side by side with the SCA. And it was only, I think it was 68 or 69 that the SCA finally divorced the Mythopoeic Society and said, no elves, no magic. We're going to do history.
Wow.
And there's still an interlacing between the SCA and science fiction fandom and gaming, which is also came out of science fiction fandom. And so there is, I mean, we do demos out here at least at major gaming conventions because we pull in a few people each time.
Yeah, absolutely. We do something very similar here. we tend to aim our demonstrations at either medieval fairs or conventions for gaming and, for lack of a better term,
Right.
nerd culture, because in the end, we're all nerds.
Yeah.
We just have our own individual flavor.
Yes, we used to have one where it was like, how big is a 10-foot hall? And we'd build a 10-foot hall, 10 by 10, standard D&D corridor. And then we'd show that, fighting with that greatsword wasn't nearly as easy as it had to be.
But you have such an amazing history across the SCA. I would like to ask you about your peerages, because you've got quite a few of them.
Four,
yes. So,
I'm missing a couple.
Can we know? Pardon?
I said I'm missing a couple.
There's always time.
Perhaps. If the SCA survives this whole time.
Yeah. What was your first peerage that you received, and when did you?
That would be my Baldric, and that was in AS6.
Wow.
I was given my Baldric, took my Master at Arms at the same time as Paul of Bellatrix was knighted. Wow. And a person you've probably not heard of, at least as much as you might have, Kevin Peregrine. I was one of 3 people called up in front of the king and given my choice. And the ceremony in that day was, king said, will you, become a knight and swear fealty? And if you wanted to be a Master at Arms at that point, you had to say no to the king. And then the ceremony continued on of, well, in that case, will you accept being a Master at Arms? And to which I said, thankfully, yes. And I've been a Master at Arms ever since. And see, the second peerage I earned would be my royal peerage. Both as a count back in the East Kingdom and then as a duke in the West Kingdom. And that one's fairly easy to earn if you're a good fighter. And I was better than I thought. Both of my wins, I felt, were pretty much my body turned on, and I don't remember striking the killing blows. Okay, just the mind went there, the body took over. I've seen shots, both photographs and video. And it's really clear that I didn't plan to throw that shot. There's no tension in my body whatsoever, and suddenly the sword moves.
That's amazing. Those are the best moments, right?
And those are good moments. And my reign in the East was complicated by the fact that I was living in Buffalo at the time. And the entire power structure in the East was focused on the Boston-Washington corridor. Boston-Washington corridor. It's called Boswash. Because basically you travel down the freeway from Boston to Washington and never leave town. It's one wow. town to another. It's some of the towns are a little less dense than others, but you go to Boston, Trenton, and Philadelphia, Baltimore, and down to Washington. And it's just all town. But I was a foreigner because I was from the West. And I was way out in the sticks. I was out in the boonies. This buffalo is now Ethelmark.
Oh, wow. Of course.
And there was Buffalo and Rochester were the two places that actually had populations. But ruled there and then came back out the west where I was a foreigner because I came from the East Kingdom, even if I had started here. And so that was, I reigned, I stepped down, got our scrolls. And then I went back to being a herald, which I hadn't stopped being, and doing other things. And eventually, William the Lucky decided I ought to be a pelican. Just before he says, now at this point we say, in the ceremony, we say, I don't know how he could possibly be doing more than he already has, except that I know he's stepping up as principal herald in May.
Amazing.
And then it was many more years. In fact, I can't remember how many more because when I need to know when I was made a laurel, I go look it up in the wards list. But that was more than, well, it's like 15 odd years ago now.
Mm.
And I'd been doing heraldry and bardic stuff for some time. And Jade of Starfall was on the throne. And no, I don't remember which of his reigns it was either. And he called me up in front of the court 12th night. And he says, I went to kneel in front of him because that's what you do. And he said, no, stay standing up. I want to talk. And I'm going, oh God, Jade go blah. Because Jade is, I don't know if you ever met Jade, but he is eloquent. Being a court herald with Jade is tons of fun as long as you're capable of going, he just went off track. He'll be back. He'll be back. Okay, Your Majesty, you do need to say those 3 words. And he worked them in. And at the end of the ceremony, he was like, okay, and the next order of business is, but things like remind him, yes, swear fealty.
Yeah, that's important.
When they're making a knight, yes, very important. And he starts talking about how long I've been in and all the things I've done, and this and that and the other thing. And I'm standing there, my head down, because he's praising me the hell out, and I'm embarrassed. And my mind is going, oh gods, he's got some sort of an idea for a time and grade award to give to old timers. I'm going to have to figure out how to tell him this is a bad idea. I'm not taking it, and make him look good all at the same time.
Yeah, without going.
No, and make him look good.
Yeah.
So my little Harold Bard brain is going at this full blast, and then he calls up the Order of the Laurel, and I'm going, And at that point, I said to him, okay, I know how this ceremony goes. I'm supposed to be kneeling facing you. And he said, and the Queen grabbed my other shoulder and said, you just keep facing outward for a while. We'll get to that.
Amazing.
And it was amazing. I've seen video of that. I didn't hear the cheers. Again, the mind goes like that. You undoubtedly, all of you have undoubtedly had that moment when you're giving something big. I mean, how much of your knighting ceremony do you remember, Eva?
Yeah. I remember getting slapped in the face. That's amazing. So you were done for heraldry and bardic work?
Yes.
Amazing.
And
the
I
bardic
had
in there is
Bruce
so strong.
Bruce Draconarius of Mistholm spoke for me as a herald. And, that was just like, okay, fine. If he thinks he's my peer, I'm his peer. And then Wanda Reardon, Viscountess Wanda Reardon, who is a laurel for bardic work, and spoke for me for bardic. And so I decided that, okay, it wasn't just Jade being overwhelming. This was actually something the council had decided I was worthy of, so I accepted it.
Amazing. So do you sing, or are you more of a storyteller in terms of your bardic work?
I write songs. I have written songs and I perform them. I also write poetry and I tell stories. And recently I've actually gone public with some of the stories I've written and have been self-publishing. But, and I intend to publish a book of poems that I've written for the SCA as well, and songs, so I can get them out there. But
that is awesome.
Say what?
I said that would be awesome.
But I started back in the East Kingdom with the bardic, and wrote a little song about why I joined the SCA, which was a filk, Once I Had a Little Dog by Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Do you have a favorite song? SCA one?
I've got one I do fairly often. I stole the tune.
Makes you do it.
Well, it's I stole Rio Rio Chio as a tune, and then wrote a song about a young wastrel which worships Bacchus and is working on seducing a young damsel. And the chorus is in Latin.
Oh, wow.
Veni, vidi, bibi. I came, I saw, I drank. The bimus is a second, the bere is a second, whatever it is, verb. So it declines just like venite and videre. So it's actually grammatically correct Latin.
Amazing. That's incredible.
That is, yeah, absolutely. With all of your time that you have been a part of the SCA, I'm sure that you've had quite a lot of proud moments. Would you share one or two of those with the populace?
Mean things I've done of which I am particularly proud?
Yeah. I realize this may take a while to process through.
Yes, it's going to take a little while to process through. Let me think, and why don't you give me another easier question while I think?
Sure. You are one of the stalwarts in the Lochac at Penzic campsite. And part of the reason that we did want to interview you was so that the populace of Lochac can meet and see who camps in the Lochac campsite. How did you become a part of that?
Well, when I first started going to Penzic, I was camping with Duchess Megan, whom you people know, and Duchess Ellis, whom you people know. And we were in little tiny corners of space because of the way Pensick runs, which is to say, you get little tiny corners of space unless you're a big camp. And Gregory, of course, was friends with them, and I met him and became friends with him as well. And our little corners of space were getting smaller and smaller and less desirable. And he said, come on, camp with Lochac. And the next Pensick I didn't go to. And so I'm looking at, oh God, I don't want to camp with the West. I see the West all the time. And I said, Greg, you invited me earlier. Is it still on? He said, yeah, sure.
So this is the
Greg
Gregory
being Greg. And so I moved in to Lochac camp and have camped there ever since. I mean, it's really nice being on Mrs. C's front lawn. I mean, she's just such a wonderful person, and she comes and visits the camp periodically. And
for the many people who haven't been to Pensick, can you explain who Mrs. Cooper is?
Mrs. Cooper is the matriarch of Pensick. She and Ken, who is unfortunately passed, were the parents of most of the second rank Coopers, though there are other relatives involved. Third generation Coopers are now the people who are actually doing the serious running of the event. But it was their campground. That was the campground that Pensick starting at Pensick 5. And they liked the SCA, so they started building up the campsite. And basically, if Mac and Betty liked something, it happened. When Lochac first started coming to the event, they were getting shoved into corners again because they were a small group but a kingdom. And Betty met with some of them and was totally fascinated by the accents, of course, because everybody is, and said, well, you come all this way and you know, why, let's make camping easy for you. Why don't you camp right over here in our front lawn? That way you won't have to worry about reserving space, anything like that, because you'll be on our land. And we say who goes on our land. A bunch of Lochacians had also been in Camp Kilkenny, which is the other camp on the Coopers. They are in the side yard, we're in the front yard. And so Mac and Betty adopted Lochac. And then Gregory, because Gregory's a great schmoozer. Gregory is just everybody's best friend. And so his household, I mean, Lochac Camp is actually International House because one of his squires is from Callantyre, and there are other squires from other nations, and then there's family of squires, and but we're all very conscious of the fact that we are camping on Lochac ground, and we work to help keep that up. So things I'm proud of. Oh dear. I think I'll just pick memories rather than necessarily things I'm proud of. One of my best fighting. What? Okay. One of the things I remember really, really well was a time when we were having a West Ontario war. And they had a castle, an actual wall, plywood on beams held together with hinge pins and things like that. Had a real gate. And at one point, I pushed through the gate to push back a charge and my back up against the wall. And I had an axe and shield. And I had pikes coming over my shoulders from the friendly people behind the wall. And I've got my shield up like this, and I'm seeing things, and I'm going, okay, yeah, that's a wrap with the axe. Oh, good, he fell down. And because you don't have to actually see who you're hitting at if you know where their limbs are, that they're trying to hit you. And there finally came a pause. I lowered my shield, and the ground in front of me, out to about 8 feet in a semicircle, was strewn with bodies.
Amazing.
And I looked around and said, oh, there's still plenty of them. Let me back in the gate. But that was one of those moments where, it's holy crap, this is real. I mean, they all got up again later. It wasn't that real. But then it was me not trying to stay out there and be a hero. It was me getting back inside so we could win the battle. That was one.
I know that you still fight, because we do see you fight at Penzig. How have you kept your enthusiasm and interest in this for so long?
Well, I haven't fought now for 3 years.
Okay.
It got to the point where it was getting harder and harder to recover. And a year went by and I hadn't fought despite going to wars and stuff like that. It was just, it was too much. So after the year went by and I didn't fight, I decided I would hang up the shield and put the helmet away. But I fought from the time I was 20 until I was, 72.
It's incredible.
Wow.
I fought at the 50th year celebration, and I fought at the real 50th year celebration that the West held over May Day. Yes, 51.
I have to say, as a knight, your journey is hugely inspirational, because that amount of longevity is incredible. And even though you mightn't be fighting now, the fact that you're still incredibly active in the society is a feat unto itself. So what keeps you in the SCA now after all these years? What feeds your passion?
I'm afraid the answer to that is less and less, especially with this year off where there's electronic SCA is cool and all that, but it isn't the SCA. Friends, chosen family, heraldry. I really enjoy doing court, making kings and queens look good. When the fighting had been keeping me in, that's gone. We're not allowed to hug our friends anymore. At least not if we want to stay alive and keep them alive. I fully expect there to be minor resurgences, no matter how good the vaccine is, once the SCA starts up again, because in general, we are a huggy bunch.
Yeah.
And Camping has been getting more and more problematic. The last 2 Penzigs, I had problems with heat. Which I was going to be very careful about this Penzig, except this Penzig never happened. Putting up camp takes longer and longer and is less and less worth it. I've done a lot of van camping, but I'll be going back and seeing my friends and doing heraldry. I'm active in the Facebook heraldry groups because I can do things there that help people. Helping people is a big thing. I've always worked at contributing to the SCA. When I actually turned 70 plus, I started actively giving away my jobs. I took principal herald for a second term with the explicit command to myself of find someone new to take over. I'm doing this because the kingdom has to have a herald. And abeyance is really such an ugly word.
Yes.
Yes.
And I found someone. And then they found someone. So it actually worked.
That's exactly
But I had been exchequer and I managed to pass those off. And I don't have any attached SCA jobs. I'm still a herald at large, a marshal at large.
I dare say you've earned time to think about what enriches you outside of necessarily service positions. You've earned a little break.
And I think, honestly, if you ask anybody, one of the biggest reasons that we stay in the SCA is because of the family and friends that we have made. That's truly what does keep us back.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And
I must say that I think during COVID time, this isn't necessarily indicative, hopefully, of the future of the SCA. I'm really faithful that we'll be able to one day get back to seeing our chosen family and friends in the way that we love best. And we will lose people, but I think that now's a good time for everybody to start brainstorming ways to recruit and hopefully bring some enthusiasm back into the things that we love. It might be difficult and it might be slightly different, but it doesn't mean it has to be lost. That's my hope.
I'm hoping not. When I renewed my membership, I also made a over-the-top contribution to the SCA because we need to keep the incorporation moving. I mean, you've got SCA Aussie down there, but the SCA has been losing a lot of members in the States because, well, you don't need to be a member to fight in Crown Tourney anymore. Yeah. Because there isn't any Crown Tourney anymore.
Yes.
And I'm a well-known board critic, but I have been pushing, re-up your membership. The SCA needs the money to stay alive and not die of COVID.
Part of me wonders how successful it would be to go back to grassroots of everyone who has a D&D group. Tell your friends when we can get back together, bring them to an event, find the people that used to play and go, hey, have you thought about coming back just to have drinks at an event, see what happens? And maybe we might be able to encourage some new growth or even replant some old seeds that have been dead for a while. But you never know. I mean, that's how it started, right?
Well, actually, no, it was science fiction fandom. D&D didn't exist quite yet. In 66. But actually, a better possible recruiting area would be LARPs rather than D&D.
Mm.
I mean, my D&D consists of SCA people who are doing D&D.
Yeah, I have to say across Lochac, we have been very lucky in that space of being able to return to do stuff, except where Sareva lives at the moment, because they've just gone back into lockdown because they're crazy.
Sorry, which area still in lockdown?
I'm from Adelaide, South Australia. Luckily, we've actually managed to keep it largely under control, so we get to come out of hard lockdown 3 days early. But compared to what's happening in America, where really like small things, like we had, I think, 37 cases and we locked everything down, which I think is sensible because we seem to have nipped it in the bud. So with people
and if that can be held until the vaccine is available, then I mean, New Zealand, God, they have one case and it's like, where did that come from? Trace it back.
Yeah, it's actually that is what happened in Adelaide. There was one case and it became a cluster and it went into hard lockdown. We have been very lucky across, so where I live in Canberra, I think we're at almost 4 months of no cases. So we are very lucky, and we're actually hosting our first Crown tourney this year. We're hosting it in 2 months, so very excited to have a Crown tourney / coronation happen.
And how are you going to handle distancing? I mean, if you're in your armor, that's pretty well handled.
Yeah, we have what are called COVID plans, and we've had to, because we've got our own board of directors, we've got COVID response plans that have been approved by the boards of directors and the committee. And for 12th night, we actually have had to do a COVID event plan for the local government. And we have a COVID officer on the ground at an event to ensure that everything is wiped down, the sanitization happens in line with all of the existing restrictions.
Yep, we've been able to have like trainings and gatherings in some of the groups for, I think, at least a couple of months. It's been fairly successful.
Yes. Mari has posted a few pictures of those on Facebook, and it was very pleased to see there's the fighters in their masks and there's everybody else sitting around with their masks on, and it made me feel good about the fact that you guys were taking care of yourselves. Because if you ever get Mari sick, we're not going to forgive you.
We do not do that. We love Mari.
So I suppose if we go back to the pre-COVID machine, do you have any special or favorite memories of Lochac at Penzic?
Oh,
I know everyone loves their accents. Mine's different, but
it's gotten to the point where I don't really even notice the accents because I've camped with Lochac so often. I mean, I know they're there, and it's just like I switch into Aussie listening mode, and you know, I talk in my normal voice, you know, except that I know that it's an Esky. And when Her Majesty says she needs to put on a new frock, I know what that means. But best thing I seem to remember was when we got Mikhail.
Yes.
That set up for him being surprised. The King of Callantyre just happens by and says, "Hi, can I come in and watch?" And he didn't twitch. He didn't suss at all. And he got called up and he's like, "Oh, what?" that was a good time. And Mrs. C,
I'm not
Mrs. C was
familiar with what happened. So can I have more of the story?
Oh, it was for his pelican.
Oh, that's amazing.
He lives in
Mikhail,
Palantir. Mikhail Azadon. And he lives in Palantir. And the crown had decided, your crown had decided that all the work he'd put into camp, which he does. I mean, he's the camp master, and works his butt off. So the thing is, you can't give any award to someone from another kingdom without getting permission from that kingdom. Well, Palantir had been looking at him too. Because back at home in Palantir, he's one of those people that works his ass off.
Of course.
So a plot was hatched. And machinations were made, and people were told, you really want to be sure you're at Lochac Royal Court. Really want to be sure you're at Lochac Royal Court, which, given people's class schedules and stuff, means you have to schedule around it, because it's always held in the afternoon under the trees, in this case under the sunshade. And we had the special bench for Mrs. Cooper, because she does like court. And Mikhail was sitting talking with her, and the King of Palantir and his queen come ambling by, waving to all, and come into camp. King motions them into camp. Come on in. We're just having court. Oh, gee, can we join you? And there just happened to be a couple of throne-like chairs that were set up right next to the Lochac chairs.
And this was during the reign of Stephen and Bronwyn, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so they sit down there, and they're enjoying and passing cups back and forth and stuff like that. And there's let's see, who else was it? Somebody else was offered
Ant.
the pelican. What? Ant. Yes, that was Ant. And she got put on watch. And that was cool. Everybody's going, yay, 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 yay. And then he calls up Mikhail, and Mikhail is going, no, I've got everything. I've got all the Lochac awards I'm eligible for. What's going on here? And then King stands up and says, Mikhail, you may wonder why the King of Palantir is here. Mikhail goes, no. The King of Palantir steps up and says, well, we both think you belong in the Order of the Pelican. And he goes,
That's awesome.
And various people, sort of hold him up, going, say yes, just say yes. And he did. And there were spokes things that had stuck into the crowd behind him so he wouldn't suss. And it was wonderful and everything and glorious. And he was totally blown away. That was a fun time. Let's see, other times in Lochac camp that have been really good. Time we had a supper. What is her? Althea. She's from Calatirol, so she was camping with us for a while. And she's got a Hungarian ancestry. And she made paprikash, which is mutton and lots and lots and lots of paprika and sour cream and spices and onions and stuff like that. And that's all stewed together. And then she made flatbread, fried bread, where you take dough and you put it in deep fat, keep pulling it out. And there was sour cream to put on it. And everybody is going, oh, my doctor isn't going to like this about it when I tell him. And we're going to have salads for the rest of the event. But that was a very good time. And
that sounds like just some amazing times that you've had. And unfortunately, we've actually reached our hour.
Oh,
It has just been amazing to have these conversations with you. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, it was certainly a pleasant hour conversing. Good to see you again. And again. And I don't believe I've ever actually met Magnus. But a pleasure to talk with you and a pleasure to just ramble. I do ramble a lot.
No, it is all about the stories and the sharing, and because you are such a strong influence and memory of the SCA for us, particularly camping with Lochac at Penzig and knowing your history and being one of those, really, you are one of the icons of the SCA. So it has truly been our honour and privilege to be able to have this conversation with you today.
Well, thank you. And now when Magnus will tell us that we're actually finished with live streaming.